King had said, oh, well, yes, I like the script, but I don't know if anyone would make this movie.
And then kind of came the terror.
I don't know about magic. I always called it The Shining.
Both. Three, actually. The big questions that we had kind of going in were, is this a direct sequel to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining? Is this a straight adaptation of King's novel Dr. Sleep? Or is this a sequel of sorts to King's novel The Shining? And the answer had to be yes to all of it. I am a constant reader and a lifelong Stephen King fanatic, but I saw The Shining when I was in 5th grade. And it changed the way I thought about horror cinema forever. When Dr. Sleep was published, and I grabbed it the weekend it hit the shelves, as I'm reading it, and I'm reading this, clearly quintessentially Stephen King story, all the images in my head were Kubrick images. And that tug of war, for me, was basically kind of the blueprint for what the movie could be. We were working on another film when the book was published. Mm-hmm. And I had gone to Trevor and said, Stephen King wrote a sequel to The Shining. It's awesome. Wouldn't that be an amazing movie to make? Wouldn't it be so cool if this honored, both King's Torrance family saga and protected those characters and also celebrated Kubrick's film? Wouldn't that just be the ultimate kind of heist you could pull off of this project? But it never, for a million years, did I think we would do it.
We checked the rights and realized quickly that they belonged with Warner Brothers, and we were not, at the time, on Warner Brothers' radar. And so it took us a minute to sort that out, but once we did, it flowed from a general meeting you had.
I'd left the writer's room of The Haunting, actually, to take a general meeting up the street at Warner Brothers with John Berg, and I was told the meeting was to talk about DC. And it's just a general, you go in and there's no real specific project on the table, it's just you get to know each other. And when I first signed with WME and they gave me this Bible of all these movies that were kind of floating out there looking for people, and they said, what do you want? I was like, I want Dr. Sleep. And they said, no one's gonna make that movie. Don't waste your time. But I went in and met with John, and we talked about the DC universe for a while. And it didn't look like there was anything really concrete that was going to come out of that. And kind of toward the end of the meeting, he had said, you just finished a movie. What was that movie? And I said, oh, it's Gerald's Game. And it hadn't been released yet. And he said, Stephen King, I'm a big fan as well. And I said, that's awesome. Yeah, it was really fun. And he said, how do you do Gerald's Game? I always thought it was unadaptable. And I was like, me too. That's what made it so fun. And he said, we've got a real challenging, adaptation here. Have you ever heard that we have Dr. Sleep? And I said, yeah. Not only had I heard that, I'd been trying for years to get a meeting on it. And he said, well, what would you do? For my money, you stay really close to the book. The story that he spun with Dan Torrance and with Abra and with the True Knot is great. You do that story properly. You don't change it up too much. But where you could really make it something special is on the bookends, at the beginning and at the end of the film. You go back to the Overlook, which in the book had burned down, and King is kind of defiant in the book about there is no Overlook, it's gone.
Explicit.
And
Page 1.
I was like, you go back to the hotel, and you go back to the hotel as we all know it. You go back to the Kubrick, and he went, yeah, do you? And I was like, yeah. I think that's the way to make kind of the coolest movie. It would be so exciting. And he had said, well, maybe we should do that. And I kind of left the meeting thinking, yeah, maybe we should do that. I remember I called you I was walking back to the car. Mm-hmm. And I said, I had this interesting meeting at Warner. They brought up Dr. Sleep. I don't think anything will come of it. And by the time I'd gotten to my car, he had contacted Stephen King. And Stephen King had been so happy with Gerald's Game that he had said, absolutely, that would be great. But then he didn't know what we planned to do yet.
That was nerve-wracking. Mike had a pretty clear blueprint from the beginning of what we wanted to do and how we would deviate, obviously, from the faithful book adaptation. And of course, that steps into territory that we know is sensitive to King, and having just had a good experience with him, we didn't want to screw it up. You know, he had his eyebrow up at the beginning, and then pretty quickly, kind of, after we pitched a particular scene that he quite liked, that we shouldn't go into for spoiler purposes, he kind of jumped on board, which made it no less nerve-wracking to send him the script.
Yes, and even at that point, it still wasn't, it wasn't greenlit. It wasn't. There was still no sense of like, oh, we're definitely making the film.
We'd sent it sort of near the same time to Warner Brothers and to King, and Warner Brothers just sort of said, hey, ooh, maybe we should make this. And it was before King had quite gotten back to us. They had expressed their desire to make the movie, and then King had said, oh, well, yes, I like the script, but I don't know if anyone would make this movie. And Mike got to say...
I got to say they already greenlit.
Yeah.
The email was amazing, and he wrote back, look, I really like this, and even though it treads on, a really sensitive area for him with Kubrick, he was like, I quite love the script. In fact, I like it so much, this is the kind of movie I don't think that they make, so good luck. And it was like, oh no, we're doing it. They're ready to go. We were waiting on you, and that was a really exciting thing to say. And then kind of came the terror. At the time, I had said 50-50. I had said no matter what we do, half of the people that see this will hate it. They'll hate whatever choice we made, or they'll hate that the film exists at all. And that was actually very freeing. More than any other time in my career, knowing that we're not going to please everybody, knowing that there are such strong, passionate feelings, in kind of the Kubrick camp and the King camp, and me feeling like I'm a card-carrying member of both, that instead of prioritizing how to please as many people as possible, is how do we make the movie that would make me the most excited as a fan. There's only ever been one sequel to a Kubrick film. And no matter kind of what you think about that film in particular, what everyone talks about is how Kubrick it is not. I got to have this incredible experience where not only did we get to kind of step into Kubrick's Overlook Hotel to go to work every day, which is unbelievably surreal. But I got to understand him as a filmmaker in a way I never, ever could have, because I got to put my lens exactly where his lens was, in the exact same space. And if I ever wondered, well, why did you choose this lens? Why did you choose this placement for it? Why not over here on a wider lens or over here on a tighter lens? I could actually just try that. And inevitably, kind of every time we would do this, we would come back to the conclusion that he put the lens in the perfect place. And being able to kind of feel our way around his decisions was profound. I've never had an experience like that in my life. I doubt I ever will again.
If we approach this from the perspective of fans, which we always try to do, it would have felt, somebody told me like somebody's making The Shining too, I would have said, really?
We also kind of, we looked at it a lot of times as a descendant of The Shining more than a sequel.
Yeah, that's it.
And that was a really helpful way to look at it, as something that was already separated, generationally, that had two parents, that had genetic kind of input into it in Kubrick and in King. We talked an awful lot about how I'm not Stanley Kubrick, and I'll never be Stanley Kubrick, and no one will ever be Stanley Kubrick. So the only way to kind of get through this project was not to try to be, was to celebrate Kubrick and celebrate King without trying to imitate either.
For more on Dr. Sleep, check out our review of the film.